Hey guys, how you all doing? I don't usually do overly serious rants, really, whether it's on my main gaming channel or on. Well, I mean, I suppose I've done a few serious rants on this channel, but I just fancy talking about something that's just happened over the last 24 hours. And if any of you are paying attention to the world of professional sports, you most likely will know that as of about, I think, 12, 11 hours ago, the former heavyweight champion of the world, Muhammad Ali, has died. Now, this is a particularly sad moment for me because he's been one of my favourite sports personalities ever since I got into boxing. Around the age of probably 12, 13 was when I started getting into boxing. And I have some boxers who I kind of preferred the sort of fighting style of, slightly more, maybe around the same amount as Ali, particularly Sugar Ray Robinson, Mike Tyson, just because of his sheer brutality. But let's not beat around the bush here. Like, Muhammad Ali easily was the greatest fighter of the late 60s, early 70s. He was unparalleled in terms of his fighting capability during his peak. Even when he was going downhill a little bit in the early 80s, he was still capable of the moment of pure genius and magic, and it's no wonder why his nickname was the greatest. I mean, you look at the number of fights this guy fought and the number of which he won. Sure, he lost 5 fights. Okay, maybe that's a bit of a blot, but considering the fact that he fought 61 times over the course of his career, and he won 56 of those, never drew once, and that 37 of his wins were by KO, that is a ridiculous proportional percentage of KOs and wins for any boxer. Even if you suffer like 10 or 15% losses, like Mr. Ali did here, you've still got to hang your head high because, I mean, by God, that's like over 75% of your wins being KOs and almost 90% of your fights being wins. I mean, what do you say to that? That's the kind of odds boxers of today can only dream of. I can only think of a bare few, boxers throughout history, who can even rival that. I mean, Sugar Ray Robinson, I think, won over 200 fights, and or close to 200 fights, and over 100 of those were by KO. Mike Tyson himself had a ridiculous win-to-loss ratio. He fought a few less times than Ali. He fought 58 times, but he won 50 times, and 44 of those times were by KO. So slightly less proportionally amount, but even still bloody impressive. There really are only a bare few boxers throughout history who can at all hope to match Muhammad Ali's win-to-loss ratio and the sheer number of KOs he got proportionally to how many wins he gained. I mean, the guy was balletic, nothing short of the word. I mean, we look at boxers today in the heavyweight division, and we look at how they use their power and size as the main striking force of their fighting style. Ali didn't really do this so much. I mean, he was a big lad. He was a fucking tank. You just had to look at one picture of him during the late 60s to realise this guy was a brute. He was a beast of a man. But yeah, he wasn't the biggest or the heaviest in his division, really. Even at the height of his power, even when he got slightly older and weightier, I mean, he always seemed to rely more so on his agility and his balletic sort of agility, really, more so than anything, to run rings around his opponents, tire them out, and basically end them by 1,000 cuts, bleed them to death by 1,000 cuts, as the ancient Mongolian proverb would go. And it seemed to work, really. I mean, I suppose that's probably why his, KO ratio in accordance to how many wins he got isn't higher. I would say that's kind of more so the case, really. But even still, like, it clearly worked. He used his brains and his agility more than his strength, and I think that's something we don't really see anymore in the heavyweight boxing division. I would say, probably the last great heavyweight boxers like, Mike Tyson or Chris Eubank, people like that showed like some eminence or some like slight reflection of Muhammad Ali's sort of reflexive sort of reactive boxing style, in that you use your agility in accordance with the rolling punches of your size and power as the main striking force of your fighting style. But I'd say probably since like the early 2000s, that kind of trend has tended to die out. So now that we've seen the progenitor of that kind of style of fighting in the heavyweight division now sadly pass away, I feel like even if you take out of account his impact to Black American culture, his impact to the culture of boxing, his impact to the just popular culture in general, if you take all of that out, even then his death is still a great loss, even so many years after his retirement. I mean, you just can't understate his sheer brilliance in the ring enough. I do have some boxers who I may prefer watching slightly more, but even still, I can't deny in any way that Muhammad Ali was in my top 3 favourite boxers of all time from the point that I got into boxing so many years ago. I mean, sure, he might not have fought as many fights as some others out there, like Sugar Ray Robinson, but even still, the proportion of fights that he won and those that he won by KO were just ridiculous. And I don't know if his parents, when they gave birth to him in 1942 in Kentucky, had any inkling that he would eventually come out like this, that he would go through years and years of figuring out what his purpose in life was, and eventually sort of getting drafted into the army, and that whole controversy about him refusing to fight in a foreign war, perpetuated by the US government. I just don't know. It's I suppose history is kind of meant for, of course, the study of what we could only judge in hindsight, really. Hence, that's why I study history. It's a very sort of metaphorically sort of flexible sort of academic subject in terms of how you approach it. But I mean, of course, not factually, but I suppose no one could have really guessed, even when he first started off his boxing career and showed off his brilliance in the ring when he was training, that Muhammad Ali would one day turn into this just unbelievable beast of a man who would just one day take the world by storm and just defy all expectations. It's really something you can only judge in hindsight, because I'm not sure if he had seen it when he started out boxing, but there's a possibility that he may have done, because some of his quotes and his confidence really outline what kind of a character he was. He was intoxicatingly confident and powerful in the ring, so much so that he believed he would win. He did lose a few times. In fact, out of his first half a dozen fights, he lost half of them, and then he lost his I think it was his 43rd and 32nd fight. It was his out of his last half a dozen fights, he lost half of them. My mistake. And then he lost his 43rd fight and his 32nd fight. His 32nd fight being, of course, that really famous 1971 bout against the legendary Joe Frazier. But yeah, it's oh my god, it's just unbelievable the amount of wins this guy racked up, and now I will never have the chance to talk to him about it. It's kind of sad, really, that we lost him at the age of 72. I mean, 72 is a good age to live to, but like I said, it's not just the fact that he's such an inspiration to so many black people around the world, or the fact that he's an inspiration to so many boxers around the world. It's also the fact that he impacted the way boxers fight in such a way that it influenced boxing in the heavyweight division, at least, and also the middleweight division, to be fair, for what was to become a period of 15 to 20 years or so. And the trend of sort of using mobility as the main striking force, kind of like I said, died out in the late 90s, early 2000s. But you just can't understate this guy's importance enough. I mean, you really can't, whether it's, you know, his impact on how people fight in the heavyweight division, or just the culture around boxing, or, you know, the acceptance of more, you know, black athletes over the course of history, or, you know, his famous loss to Joe Frazier in the fight of the century when he lost the WB and WBC heavyweight titles, and or God, that Rumble in the Jungle match against George Foreman in 1974. You know, probably the best boxing match of all time, easily the finest match of either Foreman or Ali's career. I mean, sure, his last 2, 3, maybe 4 fights were very tepid and not too easy to watch. He did lose his last 2 fights, and his last fight against Trevor Berbick was hard to watch. But even up to his final days, I think he was still more than capable of pulling out the stops. And I think now that he's passed away, I think, you know, we can now more than ever look back on his life and just appreciate what an absolute impact and legend this guy was to boxing. It's nothing really I can be too philosophical or deep about, really. I mean, this guy was just the legend to boxing and black American culture, and in a time when, you know, black American athletes weren't particularly as prominent as they are, well, since the early 70s, actually, more so. So whether it's in regards to how much he's influenced boxing, the way people fight in boxing, black American athletes, or popular culture in general, I think, you know, we'd all do ourselves a favour and all do the world a great favour and service by taking a moment to remember and, you know, study up on the life and greatness that was Muhammad Ali. And if you need a quote to assure you of that fact, then let me just leave you with one of his finest quotes of all time. Hating people because their colour is wrong, and it doesn't matter which colour does the hating. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time.